Good morning. The clock shows 9:30, so let's start. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bob Kalenda. I'm a member of the Transition Negotiating Committee, and I will be introducing the other members as well of that committee. Good morning, and thank you for attending today's town hall. We're going to be talking about the transition agreement primarily and some of the benefits that go along with transition. The other purposes of today's meeting is to kind of explain how we arrived at this juncture in time. We're going to be talking about the voting process, both for the board election as well as for the transition agreement language. And finally, we're going to be talking about some of the benefits that are associated with transitioning from the developer. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer period, and I'll talk more about the logistics of that later on. So first, how did we get here? In December of 2016, the community elected members of the Transition Negotiating Committee. They included Vince Gwiazdowski, Therese Butler, Mike Collins, Diane Ashby, and me, Bob Kalenda. Meeting numerous times amongst ourselves and with our attorney, we formulated an overarching strategy and a plan to address transition and the transition negotiations. After countless teleconferences, face-to-face meetings, email strands that go on forever and ever and ever, the Saddlebrook Development Company, having those meetings with us, we were able to then strike an equitable deal for transition. Now, when may transition occur? There are really three criteria under which it may occur. The first is when the last lot in HOA 2 is finally sold. The second is a 35-year rule, 35 years after the original filing of the CC&Rs with Pinell County. That original filing occurred in August of 1994, which would then make us eligible for transition in August of 2029. And the third condition, which is the one that is being exercised, is such earlier date as determined by the developer. And there it is. So what does this transition agreement represent? The transition agreement is a legally binding document that establishes the date and the conditions under which the developer relinquishes control of the association. The Transition Negotiating Committee negotiated these conditions and terms with representatives from SDC, primarily three people. Jack Sarsam, who's an executive member of the RCI overarching company, Peter Gersman, who is their attorney, and Mark Giannotti, who is their head golf person. Keep in mind that when we transition, we also have to have a board election because the new board has to be comprised totally of resident members. Speaking of election, on November 7th, 2 ballots will be mailed to your home. The first ballot deals with the board of directors and that election. The second ballot deals with approval of the terms of transition. Accompanying the ballots will be biographical information concerning each of the candidates, an executive summary of the transition agreement, which you also received this morning, and the full transition agreement. Each lot in good standing, and by that I mean you are not in arrears for your dues, will have the opportunity to vote for the board members as well as the approval of the transition agreement. On this slide, you're going to see some very important dates. Voting will start between November 8th and conclude on November the 22nd. If you choose to mail in your ballot via the U.S. Postal Service, it must reach the admin building by November the 28th. The ballots will be counted and the results made public on December 2nd at the board coffee. Just to reiterate what has been said in the past, the 3 top vote getters will have a 2-year term of office, while the 4th vote getter will have a 1-year term of office. Next, I'd like to review the terms and the conditions of the transition agreement. This document will be posted on the HOA 2 website later on today, and again, you will receive a full copy of this agreement when you receive your ballots and the other information I iterated earlier. The first condition is that the HOA will no longer incur a 4% management service fee. We remit that annually to SDC, and that amounts to about $350,000 a year. After looking at the numbers, under self-management, the HOA will save approximately $75,000 a year as we self-manage. The association will accept the common areas in their as-is and where-is conditions. In reality, the association has already been deeded almost all of the common area, including most of the roads, and we've been maintaining them for years. The association will also accept the roads, but with a warranty. Now, this warranty has 3 tiers to it. For roads that are more than 5 years old, we will accept those roads in their as-is and where-is condition. The HOA will also accept roads that are completed, but still under the 5-year warranty, meaning within 5 years of the transition date. And third, as new units are built, like Unit 46 up in the Preserve and Unit 50 over here across from the Desert View Theater, those new roads will also have a 5-year warranty. The association will also accept the current financial status of the operating and the reserve funds. In reality, again, the association has been overseeing its own budget and has funded the reserve studies since it began. The developer has agreed to provide all financial records for years 2010 through 2017. In actuality, they're required to do this by Arizona statute. The developer will also have the right to continue to develop properties in HOA2. This is simply a reiteration of a condition that is already in our current CC&Rs. You may recall that an engineering study was done earlier this year. The developer has agreed to pay the HOA $187,500 to compensate the association for remediation of 4 drainage/erosion concerns as identified by that third-party engineering report. The Transition Negotiating Committee believes that based on that engineering report, that dollar amount is a fair and an equitable settlement. The developer has also agreed to enter into a parking rental agreement at the RV park to address the additional parking near the pickleball courts, particularly when the new courts are built. The parking agreement will be an exhibit to the transition agreement and was negotiated by the Transition Negotiating Committee because HOA 1 refused to convert a portion of an unused parcel they own near the pickleball courts for parking. The Saddlebrook Ranch Pickleball Reciprocity Agreement will also be extended to September 1st, 2018, or until the new HOA2 courts are built, whichever occurs first. Again, this condition was negotiated by the Transition Committee to address the time it will take to build those new courts and to cause as few disruptions to play as is possible. Let me now review some of the benefits of transition. Number one, I want to add some context to this. The association has funded operational costs of the HOA for many, many years and has not received any subsidy from the developer since 2003. So for the last 14 years, we have been on our own. The first benefit is that the association is no longer controlled by the developer, and therefore we control our own fate. To guide that fate, we have our 5-year strategic plan that was developed and approved by the board last year. Number two, we no longer pay that 4% management service fee, again, saving approximately $75,000 annually. The association can provide the management services much more efficiently and in a much more timely manner. Let me just give you one example. If you attend the board meetings, you will often see, probably always see, that the financials that RCI sends down to the association is always 2 months in arrears, at least 2 months in arrears. We expect that we can do a much, much better job of that, so that when you're talking about April financials, you're getting that information no later than May, at the May meeting, not at the June or the July. Well, there's no meeting in July, but 2 months later. Another benefit, the association no longer has to seek permission from the developer regarding any operational decision. Right now, if we want to do anything, if we want to renovate anything, if you want to change any verbiage in any of the documents, that all has to go through their legal team up in Phoenix. And finally, the association has control of all of our investments. We have immediate access to all of the accounts, and we can make investments in a timely fashion. The Q&A is about to begin, but let me set some ground rules here. Number one, if you have a question to ask, there are microphones in the front of the theater on either side of the theater. As you approach the microphone, before you ask your question, please state your name and your lot and unit numbers. You will have about a minute to ask your question. If you have multiple questions, ask your question, we'll give you a response, and then return to the end of the line before you ask any more subsequent questions. Thank you.
Rick Morrison, Unit 36, Lot 74. Could you please expand on your bullet point regarding the RV parking lot and parking for the pickleball courts? In other words, are there going to be less RV parking spots available to us than there currently are?
It's my understanding that currently there are a number of spots that are empty, and we would just be filling those spots. What the intent to do is to move the fence so that the RVs are still totally fenced in, but then have those spaces for cars to park.
We don't understand that answer. What fences are you talking about? The entrance to the RV parking lot fences?
There are 3 sections to the RV parking.
Correct.
The first section, I'm saying the third section is the one where you have the clean out stuff.
Right.
So the first one is as you're coming in. In that area, there are multiple spots that are not being rented. So what the developer is going to do is to rent to us some of those spots. And we'll be moving the fence so that those pickleball parking spots, which will probably primarily be golf carts, they won't be going into the area where the RV parks are.
So if we're in that first parking lot, that first lot, then we're going to end up having to move. Is that correct?
No, I can't answer that because we're not taking over that whole first lot. There's only a number of, there's only like, I'm not sure of the number. It's only about 5 or 6 spots. I don't have the exact number.
That are unoccupied. Because that lot is nearly full.
Pardon?
That lot is nearly full.
I'm just telling you what RCI has told us.
I don't know.
John Harden, 3281. Question I have is regarding the plats and surveys. Are we going to receive a survey of all the property we're going to be getting? And are we getting title reports? And will the survey show all the easements that are crossing the property?
We are in the process of getting the final missing deeds, plots, etc. With regard to a survey, most likely what we will only do is a spot check survey on the outer boundaries. It's not as relevant as it used to be since we're going to be owning the golf courses also. And yes, we're looking into, we have a bid in right now for a title insurance, the cost associated with it. Will we insure every single? I don't think so. If we have a common area in the middle of a completely enclosed residential area, we wouldn't, but the more relevant and expensive ones, yes, we'll insure.
It's customary to know what you're buying and know that you do have clear title. Without a title report, you have no idea who may have owned it at some time in the past and whether they conveyed clear title.
We will have title. There are certain areas, once I was explaining, title insurance can get expensive. On an area where there's been absolutely no development prior to the development of this going in, on the recommendation of our transition attorney, he said there are areas that you definitely want to insure, and there are some that would not be worth the cost of insuring them.
Okay, the other question is, have the problems with the plats regarding Lago del Oro Water Company and Unit 24, and also the property between Unit 15, 17 and the preserve, has that been taken into account as to whether we own it or somebody else is going to own it, and who's going to maintain it?
I'm not sure what area you're referring to, John. If you want to check with us afterwards, we can look into it. If you're referring to where Unit 51 was scheduled to go.
15 and 17 do not connect directly to the preserve.
Okay,
Okay, there's a whole hillside there that
right.
has to be maintained,
Okay,
but it was never included in the plats that we have for HOA2.
okay. We just received another listing of plats from RCI last Thursday that are being reviewed right now, and I don't have the answers yet.
Hi, I'm Linda Morrison, Unit 36, Lot 74. I wasn't satisfied with the answer. I could not understand what you were talking about on the RV park and the pickleball parking. There are 3 lots with a lock on them. Are they going to rearrange the fencing or something? Could you please diagram that for me? I don't think that's a hard thing to do.
We can. What we're waiting for is in the transition agreement, there's an Exhibit D that details the rental agreement for this RV space and the area that it's referring to. So you'll be able to look at that. We also have a website so that once you're able to access this information, if you still aren't clear.
Let someone else talk if you can't. Because I can't understand you.
This is something that has just recently come up during our negotiations. This is a recent negotiation in terms of this pickleball agreement. Conceptually, the lots, there are 16 spaces that are closest to the pickleball courts that are currently fenced. That fence will be moved, so those spaces are open and there'll be parking in those spots. Does that help you?
Yes, it sort of helps me, but do you realize what it takes to get an RV out of that parking lot? If you move the fence, there's going to be difficulty for the people who are in the middle to negotiate around that parking lot to get it in and out.
Okay, I'm sure that
And my other part of my question is, you say that it's in the transition paperwork. I wouldn't want to vote no for the entire transition because there's something about this RV parking lot that I don't like.
you will have the full documentation for the transition agreement before you place your vote.
That's not what I said, but thank you.
It's not right.
Tim Benjamin, Unit 48, Lot 83. Could you give us a little more information on statement number 7? Just what the 4 main areas of concern were?
The areas that were identified by the report, first of all, the bridges. There's nothing structurally wrong with the bridges, but because of poor drainage, the road is being uplifted, so the drainage has to be addressed. In Unit 29, and I forget there's another one somewhere else, what unit, without it being in front of me, water is coming up through the roads. Yes, 31. And so we have to look at ways to address that as well. So those were the big issues.
And then in, I believe it's Unit 29, it backs up against the hill. There's 3 circles, I'm going to call them roads, and they get too much runoff. So some work needs to be done, gabachons, that type of thing, to alleviate that issue.
Thank you.
Ken Powers, Unit 32, 121. I would like to say that the fence at the pickleball courts, you know, the road that goes up to the, whatever it is up above, fence is going to be moved out that way. We are going to stick a gate right there so the golf carts can go in there, and another one right at the corner. We are not going to affect your RVs at all.
I can't answer for him, but what he said is correct. Any relocation of fence, I don't see how it's going to affect the RV parking. I don't think Robeson would allow that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Ooh, there it goes.